Hello, how's it going? So we're getting ready to start this stream. Just let me know in the comment if you can hear my audio okay. Okay, perfect. All right, well, we'll get started here. Just 1 second. Just need to check. Just gonna gather my list here, and then we'll get started. Okay, well, welcome everybody. So in this stream, what we were gonna do was talk a bit about several different types of baking workflows. And so I have like a list of things we're going to cover. And so I think what we'll do is get started by taking a look at some workflows with ZBrush. So here, let me flip over here to the screen. And we're going to get started here. So let's take a look at an example where we're going to be using ZBrush. So I have a character that I've been working on. And this right here is going to be the low res mesh. So let me just switch my shader here. Let's see, we'll just do madcap gray so we can kind of see this. Okay, so yeah, and if anybody has any questions, just shoot them over into the live chat. I'm watching that as we go as well, and so we can take care of those questions as they come up. And yeah, just let me know if you have them here. I'm just checking that live chat. Okay, so yeah, like I said, I have a little character here, and one of the first things I wanted kind of to discuss was some workflows from ZBrush on using the FBX export. And so we have a new release of Substance Painter that's actually dropping out today. It might actually already be live. So it's Substance Painter 2.6. And there's a feature within there that it actually kind of improves the way I kind of work with ZBrush. So I kind of want to show that. So one of the things that we want to do is we have a low res, and then I also have like a high res mesh here as well. So what I'm working on here is a copy. So let me see if I can't open up the previous version as well. So let me jump into here. Hopefully it's saved. I think it's this guy. Let's say no on this. And we'll open this up. So, okay. Here is the kind of the base that I have so far. And so this particular subtool here has several subdivision levels. And so the idea was that, okay, well, I'm working on this and I'm kind of doing some concepting work here in ZBrush. And what I want to do is just kind of zip this over to Painter so that I can do some baking and such. Because I don't really like doing the baking, well, anywhere other than, say, Painter or Designer. What I did was just really quick went into my UV map. Now, I lost all my UVs that I had before. So what I did was I just used UV Master. With that, I had to work on a clone so that I could create the UVs. And that's where I was getting this other guy here. So first thing I did for this was I used was take the Z plugin here. And let's just dock this over here to the side. At this subdivision level that I have here, I went into my tool here, and like I said, I've got this one level. I think it's pretty high in the actual. Can't remember what level I put this at. Let's see here. This was just at subdivision 4, and so this part here, no UVs, didn't worry about it at all. What I came over here for the FBX export was I want to export the selected tool, which was just the body here. And then I make sure that I have smooth normals enabled. It's not really well, I don't know, I was going to say it's not really that important when you have like a really, really dense mesh, but I always just have it enabled. So then I exported this guy out as my high res, and I did that as an OBJ. Then the next thing, like I said, was I worked on a clone of that so that I could just do some quick UVs here in UV Master, which should be this guy here. All right, yeah, so it's this guy. And let's just make sure he does have his UVs. So yeah, like I said, just some quick UVs here. All right, so then the next thing for this was I wanted to be able to create some different materials that I'm going to use inside of Substance Painter. So if I take a look at my polyframe here, you can see that I have a bunch of different polygroups. And the way I kind of did this guy was, you know, part of the base mesh was done in like a 3D program, and then so I kind of broke up some of these shells. You know, honestly, I don't remember exactly what my reasoning behind that was. There was something that made total sense to me at the time, and I don't remember why. But in this case, it just helped me because I used auto groups and just made a bunch of polygroups here. So each one of these polygroups can now become a separate material or texture set inside of Painter. So what I do is I come back over here to this Z plugin, and I come over to my FBX export. Again, make sure, well, selected, it's the only subtool, doesn't really matter. But the other thing that's really important here is underneath these options, I want to make sure that I have my export polygroups as materials is enabled. So that's going to basically take all these polygroups and assign a material ID to it. So I want to make sure that I do that. And then again, I just exported this guy out. So now let's jump over to Painter and take a look at how this is working. So let me create just like a new project here. And let's grab that mesh. So it was body low. And everything else is okay. All right, so here's my guy. And so you'll notice that all of those polygroups that we had selected, they are now these texture sets. And so, you know, this is, you know, something that we've kind of covered before. The one thing that I never really liked about this with ZBrush was that you know, you had no control over what these names were going to be for these materials. And the way it is right now, it's, you know, it's just material 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on, and it really stinks. So what you can do now, though, in Painter is we can actually rename these texture sets, and this is part of the new update 2.6. So for example, one of the things that I'll do is, like, say I want to target, I don't know, let's look at the face. So I can hold down the Control, Alt, and right mouse button, and that will, and just click on an area of the mesh, and that will quickly select that texture set. Then I can just come into here. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on 253. Let me launch the other version of Painter. So I actually have a beta build on here. Hold on just a second. So what I'm doing here is launching an actual, another kind of binary of Substance Painter. Be just a second. Let's make sure this guy's going to load up for us. And like I said, this Substance Painter 2.6 should be out already by the time of the stream here. And again, I'm just waiting for this to load up. Here we go. All right, so here we've got 2.6, and it looks like it launched 2 of them. And we'll close one of these guys. All right. So now let's just kind of do this again. So File, New, Select, and then we're going to add our mesh. Okay, and then so like I said, we can come in, Control Alt, right click just to quickly select you know, a texture set. And now we can actually double click and we can start to just type in to rename these texture sets. So this is awesome. So here again, I'm just going to come in and just rename these guys. This is hair. Let me just select this, and I can hit solo. Okay, so this is arm. And I'll just call this arm underscore left. And let's see, we get this guy. This is going to be arm right. And then we got this guy here. What's this? This is just the, I'll just call that body. And then this last one here I know is going to be legs. So now I can go in and just rename all these texture sets, and I don't have to worry about the issues with ZBrush or anything like that. So that's really good. Okay, so once all this is set up, now I'm ready to go in and just bake. So what I'm going to do is just come over here to my bake textures, and I'm actually going to bake my normal. Let's see, let's just close all these guys. We're going to bake our normal, and then we're also going to bake our ambient occlusion. And we'll set this to 2K, and for the high definition mesh, we are going to load in this guy. This is body high OBJ. And then I'll just bake this. So here I'm going to set this to bake all texture sets. And then I'll let Painter just kind of run through and do its baking thing here. All right, it'll be just a moment here as it just kind of runs through everything. It's baking the ambient occlusion and our normal. And we just about got it. Here's our hair. It's the last one. And there we go. So now you can see that we've got our bake, and we've got our normal and our ambient occlusion, and everything has been baked for all the texture sets. We were able to rename these texture sets, and again, these texture sets are being derived from the polygroups that we created in Painter. So one question here, when will 2.6 be released? It's actually today, and I think it is actually already released. So here, let me just type that into the chat here, so everybody can see that. So today, also there is a tutorial that that I did as well that goes through all of the new features of 2.6. So just to really quickly kind of iterate, like I said, we've got the ability to rename texture sets. You can reassign texture sets. So this is really great that you can now rename materials in your 3D programs, and then you can relink texture sets between the original mesh. So here you can see that the original mesh materials from ZBrush are still retained in the file. They're material 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. And then I have these project texture sets, which I've set here. So the names are actually going to be separated. And we can relink these as we go. So on Substance Academy, I just added a new video for this. It's part of the new features course. One other thing, we also have a new plugin here that allows you to run through and update resources within the project. So really, really cool. For instance, let's say you did a stroke with using a special alpha, and then you want to change that alpha, you can update that resource, and the entire stroke will update for you with that new resource. So pretty cool. So that's going to kind of handle some of these, some of this kind of new ZBrush workflow. Again, polygroups as materials, and then we can rename those polygroup sets here as texture sets in Painter now. So another thing that we kind of want to talk about with this too is being able to bake in that vertex color. So let's say that I am here in ZBrush, and I wanted to, and I actually did some poly painting onto this. So for example, let's say here in my head, I wanted to do some painting here. So let's do this. Let's do, let's enable RGB. And I'll try picking a color here. Whoops. Well, I'll tell you what, let me actually, let's see, I've got another project here I can, no, I don't have that with me. Sorry about that. I'm just kind of thinking out loud. I'm trying to think of a better way to kind of showcase what I want to do here with this. So the idea here of what we want to do is I'm coming in, and let's just say that as I paint some polypaint information like this here, what I can do, this is terrible, of course, but, say this was like, maybe I'm, a way that I typically use this is I don't actually do like any of the poly painting texturing here in Painter. I'm sorry, in ZBrush. I'm going to do that inside of Painter. Although there are some pretty nice tools in ZBrush for being able to, mask based on cavity and things like that you can get if you have like a real high res detail. That might be beneficial. But the way I'll kind of use something like this is, let's say that this guy is, let's see, if I go into my color, where is that? Whoops. So I hit my, this is one reason that just kills me about ZBrush. There we go. It's just like you don't use it every day, and then like you just all these weird keyboard shortcuts and everything get to you. So yeah, another thing like I'll do is like say you have like a polygroup like we have traditionally. So I could fill this polygroup or fill this with the polygroup color, and that's going to give me like the entire head. But what if I want to say isolate just like maybe the ears? Then I might come into this guy and then start to paint maybe a specific coloring here for my ears. This is a very simple example, but maybe I had something like the eyebrows and I want to make those like a bright blue or something like that. And then once I export this and I have that poly paint information in there, which is basically just vertex color back inside of Painter, if I then want to come back here to my bake textures, I'll then enable my ID map. And then I want to make sure, see, I can set this for any of these guys. So like, for instance, we did that on the head, so I could switch this to just be the head texture set. And for our color source here, we do want to keep this here to vertex color. And the generator, in this case, this can be kind of confusing because, for instance, if we set this to like, say, material color, this color generator it's not going to really do anything. Even though it's still enabled here. So, it's a little confusing because some people see that and they go, oh, well, it's material color. Is it going to do like can I randomize my, things like that. If you set this to say vertex color, these settings don't really, aren't really going to do much because we're not going to randomize the vertex. It's going to get the vertex color from what's actually in the file itself. So that vertex color is basically going to be that red that we just did in ZBrush, and then we can bake that as the ID map. And then the idea is that you use that ID map when you come in here to your add color selection. So, then we could pick certain areas. Like I said, maybe we select just the ears. We select them through just painting that poly paint information around the ear, maybe the eyebrows, or it could be maybe if you had like buckles on like a chest piece or something like that. The buckles can be, it might be easier to just fill that with a poly paint. A poly group, and then convert that to poly paint and so on. And you can embed that in the file again when you export that, and then Painter can bake that. So it's just another way to kind of utilize what that vertex color baking is going to do. All right, so the next thing that I wanted to talk about was kind of a combination of things where I want to talk about baking normals and then using the match by mesh name. But before we do that, actually, I think a better way to handle this would be to talk about another feature, which is we can actually bake maps directly from the high poly mesh. And we get a lot of questions about this, and you guys probably could get a lot of questions about this from your students. So let me do this. Let me create like a new project here. And I will come into here and come over to, let's see, I've got something here on my desktop already. Let me use this. Let me use this guy here. All right, so this was this is just an asset that actually ships with Substance Painter 2.6. It's part of a new kind of sample scene, and we have this Matte Boy mesh here. And so this guy doesn't actually have he doesn't have like a high res version of it. So this is the low and this is the high. So a lot of times when you want to bake your maps, you can do that directly from the mesh that's imported into the project. And a lot of people don't know that, I don't think. So for example, let me see here. Let me go over to my viewer settings. I'll enable my wireframe on this guy. And so if I zoom in again, you can see that this is basically represents kind of the high poly in this case. And we're just painting or working on that directly here inside of Substance Painter. Okay, so what we want to do now is bake maps directly from this. We don't want to use a high-res mesh. So it's real simple. I've got my 3 texture sets here. So I'm going to just come in here to my texture set settings, bake textures, and we'll set this up. So first thing I want to do is my output size. I'm going to set it to 2K. And the first thing I want to do is I want to disable normal, because we're not going to bake a normal map because, well, first off, we don't need one because we actually have the high-res mesh. And you cannot bake the normal map without a high-res mesh anyway. So you need a low and a high to derive that information. And so I've noticed myself on the forums, I've gotten quite a few questions about that lately, of people, wanting to bake the normal, but they don't have a high-res. And so, I just have to let them know you can't do that. But we can do everything else, like our world space, our ID. Now, in this case, I don't have any ID, so I'm going to disable that. Ambient occlusion, I want to bake curvature, and I want to bake position. And my thickness, I don't care about, so I'm going to turn that off. Now, here for my position, what I might want to do is just set this to, well, I can do all axis or I can do a single. Here, let's just do the Y axis. So maybe we want to do something here with like a dirt effect, where we get more of a dirt here on the bottom versus the top, and so on. Now, if I come over here to my common parameters rollout, you can see that I get like some of these little warning symbols here, and these are basically just letting you know, like, hey, you don't have a high-res mesh. And sometimes people, and I totally do this myself, you see this as, oh, wait, this is an error, I can't bake. I can't do anything because I've got this little symbol here. And all this is just like a caution or a warning letting you know, hey, you're going to bake, but you didn't put anything for a high-definition mesh. And that's perfectly okay, you don't have to. So, of course, if you want, you could set up some anti-aliasing here for your maps and so on, or you can still use the match by mesh name if you need to. So you got everything set up, and then here I'm just going to say bake all texture sets. So it's going to just batch process all 3 of these texture sets for me. And what it'll do is it'll bake that based on the mesh that is loaded. So I don't need to load a high-res mesh at all, which is cool. So again, it's something that we're trying to show a lot of people, because it is confusing, and a lot of questions that have been coming in our forum are asking specifically, like, well, do I have to have a low and a high? A lot of people have been asking, oh, well, why do I have to make a low res to use Painter? And you don't. So that's one thing. So here we'll just let these guys bake out, and you can see it's starting to kind of show up here in the viewport. And here are the maps. So for instance, what are we at? We're on our body. If I come over here to my viewer settings, I can switch this mode to additional map. Of course, for normal, we don't have anything. If I'm not using normal, what I do is I come over here to my texture set, and I can just blow out this channel completely. So I don't even need it. So then if I just kind of cycle through these guys, well, here, that's going through my material channels. We have to do it this way, actually. So here we want to do solo. We want to do additional maps. And so, like, again, here's my world space, and here is my position, curvature, and so on. So as you can see, we have these maps, and we didn't have to bring in a low-res mesh. So a question coming in. So you didn't need to check the box that said use low-res. Let's see here. Yeah, that's true. I did not need to do that. Now this setting, this use low poly mesh as a high poly mesh, I need to ask the devs about that, because that's something that just came in one of the recent builds that we had, I think. And honestly, I'm not really exactly sure why that's there, because I've never used it before and it bakes fine. So I'm not sure exactly why they're saying use the low poly mesh as high poly mesh in this case. Because it doesn't really make any difference that I can see if I don't input this. I actually take that back. I think the reasoning behind this is if you did have a high definition mesh loaded in here and I wanted to bake the map just from the low poly, especially like if Vertex, like maybe in your curvature map, the way this is probably is, notice the algorithm says per pixel, and you can switch this to per vertex. So if you want to bake, from per pixel, meaning that it's going to derive that from another type of map, whereas if you set this to per vertex, it's going to pull it from the vertex. but again, it's doing that without me having to enable that. So I'm sorry I don't have a really great answer to that. I'll check into that to see exactly what that feature is. But from what I'm seeing, you don't have to have this enabled if you do not have anything in your high-res mesh. Now, if I had something here and I wanted to say, no, don't use what's loaded in here, I do just want to bake from the load, that's when you could enable that. And I think that's what that feature's for. But like I said, I personally have never used it that way. Because if I've loaded a high-res mesh, I just want to use that. I don't know of a reason why I would do it the other way. Okay, so that's how we can run through how we can just bake maps directly from the mesh that's loaded in our project. So the next thing that I wanted to start to look at was more about using match by mesh name and some other tips and techniques to do that. So what I thought for this one is, well, we'll just kind of do this one, just kind of like a live demo, really. So hopefully it'll go okay as I do this. So this time I'm using Modo. So I'm always trying to use different programs and different workflows and everything. So, but this works the same as any other application. So this is just a little piece that I've been working on for a tutorial. It's like a little hollow sight for like a rifle or something. And so what I wanted to showcase with this one, so I've got everything put in one mesh. And what I want to do is start to talk about how I might handle my UV creation for baking normal maps and how I might handle overlapping pieces like this here. So this is when I always use match by mesh name. And we've kind of covered this in earlier webinars, I think a couple months ago. But this time I think I'm going to try to go a little bit more involved in it and just kind of do everything step by step. Because again, this is something that's been coming up a lot in our forums recently. People asking questions about, well, how this process works and what can we do with this. So here, let's just jump in and take a look at how we could possibly work through this. So this isn't finished yet, but let's just try to bake some maps based on what I have so far. So right now I have everything in a single mesh. And here, let me take these other meshes here and just delete them for now. Whoops, this is coming up on the other monitor. All right, and before I do this, let me just save an incremental version of this, because hopefully I won't break anything. Okay, so I've got this guy here, and here, I'm just gonna select everything inverted for now, and let me just cut this out. And I'll create like a new mesh here and paste this in, and we'll just disable that. So I really am only thinking about this guy for right now. So I want to start creating my UVs from this. So one of the things that I'm doing here is I'm thinking about the edges that I have. And so I'm working with these kind of hard edges. And one of the rules that you want to be aware of is whenever you have hard edges like this here on this mesh, I need to make sure that I have a UV split to go with this. Or if I have a hard edge, and then let's say the UVs between these two polys are welded or continuous, then right at this seam, right at this edge here, let's say right here, the edge that's connecting these two guys, these two faces here, I'm gonna get like a black seam line. So what I need to do is split that UV to correspond with that smoothing split. And so the way that I do this, let me go over to my lists and my map here. So I need to delete this guy. So when you're working with Painter, as of now, we only support a single texture set. I'm sorry, let me say a single UV set. So right then I had two, and Painter's only going to read the first one. So I just make sure I delete them so I don't get confused. All right, so what I have right now is I'm just going to select my hard edges here. And so I'm just using, in Modo, they have this Game Tools tab, this little tool that lets you just select hard edges. So I have that going. And then I'm just going to add maybe just one more cut here and here. So I'm just kind of cutting my UV edges. And now that I have this, all I do is I go back over here to my UVs, unwrap tool, and just unwrap. And so I'm just unwrapping based on where my UVs are, and that automatically gives me this shell that I need. So like I said, here, if we look at this loop, you can see that this shell is completely separated from this shell. So you've got this shell here, and you can see where they're separated from the smoothing split. And that's exactly what I want to do. Okay, so now that I have this in place here, what I want to do is maybe just pack my UV. So let me just come in here to pack. Now, here, I want to make sure that I set like a big gap size. And like I said, I'm just showing this in Moto, but it works the exact same way if I'm using Maya or Max. I think a couple months ago, I demonstrated doing something like this in Maya. And Maya has the same settings as well, where you have your UV layout and you can pack maps and then put like a gap size. So I'm going to try something kind of high here and then run that. Basically just make sure that everything, there's a gap between my UV shells like this is what I want to do. And so just by doing that packing, it just kind of enlarged some of these shells a bit, which just gives me more textile density, which is what I want to do. Let's see here. Let me try it this way as well. Let's do this. Sometimes I like to try to orient the pieces so they're all together. There we go. All right, so yeah, just a couple little tweaks there just to get kind of this layout that I wanted. All right, so that's going to take care of my UVs on this guy. And so what I'm going to call this is, now that he's finished, is I'm just going to call this outer underscore low. So I'm already starting to use that kind of naming convention that I want to use inside of Painter for that match by mesh name. So if I jump back over here to my bake textures, what we're going to focus on is baking our normal map here. So if we come up to our common properties, you'll notice that we have this match option and we have this by mesh name. And so I want to make sure that I have this set to mesh name. And then I have these two suffixes for my high and my low. And so here I've got underscore high and underscore low. Now you could change this to anything you want, lower, it doesn't matter. The name is completely arbitrary. It can be anything that you want to select. I'm just going to go with what we have by default. So that's why I'm calling this underscore low. So now that I have this guy, I'm just going to duplicate this again. Whoops, forgot to duplicate it. So here, let's see how we do this here. Duplicate. And this time I'll come into this mesh and we're going to name this one. This is going to be our high. So now we'll name this outer underscore high. I've got a UV map in here. You know what? I'm just going to delete it. I don't need it for the high res. So we've got our low res and we've got our UVs and now we have this high res. So now what I want to do is work just on this kind of high res. And so to create this high res material, high res version, what I'm going to do is just, again, select my hard edges like I have here. And I'm actually just going to bevel them. So I run like a bevel tool, and I just bevel this. And you can see I've got a nice little rounded round here. So I'm just going to add a few more subdivisions into there. And I'll drop that tool. Now, once I kind of do this here in Moto, one of the things I have to do, if I toggle my wireframe, I get a little bit of some weird shading issues. You don't get this in Maya, but Moto has a tool that lets me fix this. So what I'm going to do is just come over to here, and I'm going to recalculate the vertex normals, and that fixes it for me. So this now is going to become my high-res mesh that I have here. So what I'm going to do, let's see, we'll hit go into my item mode and select this high-res mesh. And let me just do a quick check here in my preferences for my FBX output. So I'm going to start exporting out these files here. So this is the kind of same setup I use inside of Maya, or this is what I suggest for any program. So for example, I've got save geometry materials. I do want that. I do want to save my smoothing group, so I make sure that I have that enabled. Also, there's an option here for save your tangent basis. Now, I don't want to do that because I want to have Substance Painter compute the tangent basis for me. And Substance Painter does that using MICT, which is the same tangent basis that's used inside of UE4 and the default tangent basis that's used inside of Unity. So I just kind of do it that way. If you wanted to, you could enable save tangent basis, and what happens is once you bring this into Painter, Painter looks at the FBX and says, oh, there's tangents here, there's a tangent basis in this file. I'm going to use that to compute. Now, when you do that, though, you need to make sure that on your side, like if you're taking this into UE4 Unity, you need to make sure that UE4 Unity is no longer using MICT anymore, and they're going to try to, you need to set them to compute the tangent based on the tangent basis in the FBX as well. So roundabout, you can still kind of have a synced workflow this way, but it's more of a pain, so I just leave it unchecked. Okay, so we have all this set. And then I'll just export this guy here. So let me do export as, and I'll just call this out high. I'll just replace that. And here's my out low. So now I'm going to come in here and export this guy. You know what? I'm not going to do that yet. All right, so we've got a high, then that'll work. Okay, so let's do another one. All right, so what we're gonna do right now is let me just enable this mesh piece here, and I'm gonna grab this other next piece I have into the shape. So this guy here. So I'm just gonna cut this out, and let me create a new mesh part, and we'll save this into here, and I'm gonna turn off this one. So now I've got like these two pieces that are in here. So we've got this on the outer low, and we've got this one here. So these are my two pieces here. So actually, let me do this. All right, that'll work. Okay, so I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. All right, so what I want to do now is just quickly create some UVs for this guy as well. So let's go into our UVs. Oops. I gotta make sure I turn my wireframe on. Okay, that was what was confusing me. Okay. Let me turn that off. Okay, so this is what we have. All right, let's come into here and delete that map set, because remember, I want to make sure that I only have a single UV set when I work on this guy. And so, I've been working on this. I've been setting hard edges on this as I model. So it's going to be real easy for me just to select my hard edges, and then I'll come over here to my UVs and use the unwrap tool. You know what? Let's do this. I think I want to put like a little cut into here. I'm going to try to be quick with it, so let's just see if this works for me. So yeah, then I kind of look at this. I got a little bit of a problem with the way this guy unwrapped and this guy. So I'll tell you what, let's do this. Let's go back and select these UVs here. And so what I'm doing here is I'm just going to try to help the unwrap. So sometimes you have your hard edges. I'm going to put another seam. Notice I'm trying to put this seam towards the bottom, where this will probably never be, seen for the seam. And then we'll put one here at the top. Like this. Okay, so let's see if this could possibly give us a better unwrap. So here we'll go back to our unwrap tool and run it. All right, little closer. And that's what I thought. This guy's giving me a little bit of a headache. What are these? All right, so here I'm just kind of looking again of what I need to do. So let's just go back into here. I see what I've got. So what I'm going to do is maybe just split this guy off here. And let me do these guys again. All right. Hopefully this will do it for us. Let's see. So we'll unwrap. Still having a little bit of trouble here with this guy. Here, let's see if we could do this more. Sorry about that. I forgot to. And let's see if I can't fix that. There we go. So I'm just fixing him. And And then I got this guy here. So for him, what we need to do is I just need to put another, I'm just cutting a UV seam here. There we go. Still a little problem, but I don't want to waste too much time on it. And then this guy, of course. So he's just a complete circle. So yeah, I needed to just come in and just cut a few seams in here like this. Move him out of the way. Okay, so just a second here. We'll get this last piece in place. Let's do it like this. So what I'm looking for here is I have that piece here. So let me tear this guy off. Because again, like I said, it's important when I'm working on this for this bake to come out correctly. Is I've got these hard edges, and I've got to make sure that I don't have continuous UVs into this guy. And so and that's precisely what I kind of have here. So see, he worked out okay. And if we come over and do a loop on this guy, this is the guy that's giving us trouble here. And for some reason, it is not letting me, it's ignoring my splits here. So let me just check that again. Which, let's see, now we could unwrap this guy maybe. It's completely ignoring what I have going on here. Sorry about that. Be just a second here. Let me just do it a different way. So we'll loop this guy. Okay, I see what's going on. There we go. So there was actually a flipped polygon in there that was causing that problem. Okay, so maybe now this is going to work like we think it should. Nope. Sorry about this. So sometimes in this case, what I'm going to do here is just do project from view. All right, so now we'll get him unwrapped. Okay, so this might actually help solve, actually talk about again what we have. So like I said, if we go back over into this guy and I select here, you can see that I have these hard edges on this area, but the problem that I'm running into is for this piece, like it's not separated at all. So that's going to be really bad for me. So what I'm going to do here is just manually kind of take these guys and I want to break them off. So I'm going to tear that guy off of there. I'm going to come into this loop. No, that loop's okay. Let's grab this loop and we'll just, whoops. We'll grab this guy and loop and make sure that we tear that off. And then I'll come over into that unwrap and just kind of unwrap that a bit. There we go. So now I'm separating them. That's the whole key. So then I've got this guy. And then lastly, we have this little piece here, which was that edge that was giving us all that trouble. So we'll unwrap this guy. See, that's still giving me a problem. And it's because it just needs to be cut, but it's not recognizing my seam on that. So I'll tell you what, we'll probably just forget about it for now. So what I should be able to do, it'd actually probably be easier in Maya. I could just go into here and just cut that UV edge right there. So here, let me try it like this. Let's do that. All right, and we come into unwrap. Yeah, still not going to work, so I'm just going to quit messing with it. All right, so let's do this. We know that's going to give me a problem, but that's okay. So now we have these guys. Let me just pack them. And again, I've got a high gap size with that. So boom, we just pack everything together. And we know this guy's giving us problems, but we'll let it go. Okay, so now we got this other piece here. And this is going to, let me just name this guy. This is going to be my inner, oops, I hit cap locks on that. So inner underscore low. Okay, so now I've got an outer and an inner underscore low, these two guys. And they both have their UVs. So I'm going to select both of these guys here, like this. So these two guys are selected, and this is going to become my low-res mesh here. So let's see. Another thing I think I'm going to do with this is let's make sure I've got some materials assigned. So I don't yet. So let me hit, let me create an outer material, and let me come in here and create a inner material. All right. So I also have two different materials. And then I just had a crash. Crazy. Oh, goodness. Okay. Hold on just a moment. Let me bring this back. Yeah. Yeah. I'm starting not to miss it myself. I see you're saying that. Okay. I'll tell you what. I might just... I don't think we're going to be able to go through that again because it didn't save. Let me just check real quick because I might actually have... a saved version of that. Let me just check and see what I have here. Yeah, I don't. All right, so I'll tell you what. I've got a different way I can do this. Yeah, it does. Yeah, sorry guys. Every time, you know, I just ran through this like several times a day and it worked fine. Here, I'm going to run something here in Maya and we'll get this to work. All right, so let me just open up a different scene here. Just a second. All right, so what I was going to do, and I'll just kind of re-illustrate it on this other asset. So what I was showing there with that hollow sight point was the same kind of technique and workflow that I used when I did this asset as well. And we kind of talked about this asset a little bit before, so I didn't want to do it again. But I'm going to show you, we do have something a little different to show. So the idea was, just like I was trying to do with that hollow sight, was I was using, just breaking everything off into these parts like this. And each of them had their underscore low and high. And then we want to be able to utilize that match by mesh name. But I want to show you a little bit of a different way of using match by mesh name. So let's do it this way. We just have a lot of pieces here. Here, let's do it like this. Let's just try to keep it to where it's a little simpler. So let me do this. Let me open up this low, and let's take something like. All right, let's do this. Let's take like the handle. What's this piece? Let's handle grip handle. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of these handle pieces because I don't want to do the whole thing. So let's just take these handle pieces here. And then we're going to export these. So let's do an export selection here. And this I'm just going to call, and we can't see it's off screen. Let me drag this over here. So handle underscore low. So that's all. The low res mesh that I'm working on is all going to be part of one small FBX. Smoothing groups enabled. Smooth mesh doesn't really matter in this case because I'm just polygons. And you see that I've already tripled the mesh here. So I don't need to have triangulate enabled. I usually just it doesn't matter which way you do it, whether you let the FBX I usually just manually do it here in the viewport just so I can see what's happening and everything. So this is all set up, and again, notice that my tangents and binormals is disabled. All right, so handle low export, boom. All right, now let's open up the high res version. And I'm going to do something a little different this time. So I have this high-res version. What I want to do is, so one question that we've gotten a lot was, okay, what if I don't want to have all of my high-res parts be in one file? Because sometimes, now in my case, this is high-res, but I did that same technique where I was just kind of beveling the hard edges to get like, you know, what I like to call the medium level poly. But sometimes, I mean, maybe it's a sculpted piece you did in ZBrush, or it's something that's like really super heavy. And if you had like, you know, 5 or 6 mesh parts, each like 2 or 3 million a piece, I mean, the files, the size of alone is huge. So sometimes what you can do is break these high-res pieces off into their own separate pieces. And then we can load those as separate pieces into Painter. And so that's really where I was trying to go with this here. Oh, he says I missed 2 handle parts if I'm not mistaken. Okay, thanks. I think it'll be okay. We'll see though, but thanks for the warning on that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just imagine for now that I'm working on the high-res mesh, and it wasn't already its own separate file. So I have this handle here, and let's just say it's super dense. And I don't want to put like handle this guy and this guy and this. This is all going to be too much to handle in one FBX file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate this guy out. So we want to export selection. And let me just move this window here. And so this I'm going to call handle underscore high. All right, so it's correlating to this piece that I have here. And we'll save that. So let's do another one here. So what I'll do actually is just copy that name just to kind of try to be quick about it. And then we'll export selection here. And paste that in. Okay, so a question that just came in. Tangent, are they disabled for a reason? Yes, they are. So the reason being, and while I have the window open, we'll just talk about it again. I mentioned it a little earlier. So the reason why it's disabled is because Substance Painter can compute this for you. And the reason why I'm letting Painter compute that for me is Painter uses MICT tangent basis to compute that. And that is the same basis that's used in UE4 and Unity. So if you always want to make sure to have like a synced workflow, meaning that the same tangent basis is used to compute the normal map as it's used to render the normal map. So if we don't have this enabled, Painter says, oh, there's no tangents in the FBX. I'm going to use MICT. I'm going to compute the normal that way. Then when I take that right into UE4 using like the default import settings, UE4 will then do the same thing. It'll say, oh, I'm going to use MICT to render the normal map that's part of that. You know, I'm not going to use the tangents from the file. I'm going to use MICT to compute that. And then since we computed that with the normal as well, everything's synced up. And Unity does the same thing. Now, if you have this enabled, Painter will not use MICT to create the tangents, and it will use the tangent binormals in the file itself, the FBX file, to compute the normal map. So now, if I were to do it this way and then take it into UE4, I'd have to do an extra setup inside of UE4 in the import settings to make sure that UE4 also uses the tangents and binormals in the FBX. So that's the whole purpose of it. So what I do, I leave it off because it just syncs anyways. All right, so handle base high, FBX, got everything set, boom. And then we got one other piece here. We'll do this guy. So again, the idea is that these pieces are just super high, and I don't want to try to put all this in a single file. So here we'll export this guy. Whoops, here we go. And export selection here. These could be FBX, they can be OBJ, it doesn't matter. All right, I may have skipped some, but it doesn't, oh shoot, man, we'll do one more. Okay, so hopefully that'll work. I probably missed some things, but hopefully that'll be okay for us. All right, so now let's do like a new painter project here, and let's go back and take a look at our low res. So let's see, what did I have that guy as? Let's see. Let me go back and see where I was saving those guys. I was throwing it right into there. Okay, cool. All right, so we'll come out. Let me go to my demo assets. Already have that. All right, and here's our handle low. This is what we were gonna use. All right, so this was our low res piece, and everything was together. And yeah, I did. I missed one whole piece here, but that's okay. We'll go with what we have. So now we're gonna bake our texture sets, and in this case, I'm just gonna bake my normal. And so what we can do here in our common parameters is that you can add multiple files. So they could be FBX or they could be OBJ, it doesn't matter. So let me set this here to 2048, and I'm gonna start adding in just all these files. So I had, let's see, my handle base high. We'll add another guy in here. This was the bottom piece, and the grip, and this guy, and this guy. So some of these pieces I'm missing, but see, I'm loading these all up as separate pieces. And so I didn't have to have my FBX as part of one big file, which is cool. Okay, so now for my match, I want to make sure that I set this to match by mesh name. So now it's going to look at those mesh name parts that we had in that low res FBX, and it's going to then look at these corresponding FBX files and their names and match them for the bake. And so here I'll do this with all I've got 2 texture sets in this case. We'll do it with all of these guys. And hopefully, if I didn't mess this up, it should work. And it looks like I messed something up. Oops, let me go over here to my viewer settings. Yeah. I've messed something up, but I'm not exactly sure. I think it's because I didn't have all the pieces in there like I needed to. So I shouldn't have skipped that piece, and I think it's not lining up correctly is the problem. But it started to do it for this one piece here. But anyways, I won't go back and try to fix it because it's the same workflow. I just needed to make sure, I think, in that low-res file that I had all the pieces set right. So very sorry about that issue. Okay, so here you can see that for our high-definition mesh, like I said, we can use multiple high-definition meshes. And I've set it up the exact same way as if I were to have all of these guys in the single file. So the way I did this project by default was I had one high and one low. And inside the high, all of the mesh parts had a corresponding, this first part was the same as the low, except I just appended underscore high or low based on, you know, which version this was. And like I said, if this is too high, like, you know, you don't want it, you can't have all that in one file. You can break everything off into these separate files. You just need to make sure that all the names match up. And so in our case, I think I had this whole piece missing here. Or maybe another, I think this piece was missing as well in my low, so it's messing things up. But the idea is, again, this name here, it's gonna match the name with whatever the submesh name is in here, and then when you have match by mesh name, it works. Now, one other thing that you got to think about, and I have this set incorrectly as well for right now, is you have your dilation width and you have your diffusion width. For your dilation width, you want to set this up to something higher. So I don't know, I might try like you know, I don't remember what the actual default value is, but I'm gonna try something like maybe 25, because the idea here, again, if I jump back over here to Maya and let me just open up that that last version, the low res, so we can see it a little better. Because what I was telling you before with this, let's go and look at this here. All right, so what I was telling you on like these low res where I had like these hard edges, like you see here, you know, like I was telling you, I need to make sure that I have a UV split with padding for this to work. And I do have that. So if I come over here to my UV mapping, and let's turn off. Let's see, I keep forgetting how this turns off here. This is, I'm using the newer version of Maya. Which one was it? That's the grid. Should be, okay, there we go. Duh. All right, so, where is that? Okay, so there he is. So you can see that, right where these two faces here link together, there's a smoothing split. So of course here I have a nice split within. They're not continuous UV edges. So that's working here in terms of the 3D side of things and the UV layout. But in Painter, the way I had it set originally with that baked textures, with that dilation width set to 1 like it is here, it was just going out like 1 pixel here. So what I want to do is I want to try to bleed this out. And so I usually set it to something, again, kind of high for that bake. You know, like I could set it to like 20 would be fine. I did 25 that time, but that should work. So I could set it to something like 20, and that should help fix that edge there. Because if I don't have that, what's going to happen here is that you'll end up getting, again, kind of a dark edge, because it needs to have a bleed that goes out beyond that. And again, if it does have the bleed, you got to make sure that you have that UV shell split, and that'll work. So to sum it all up, the biggest rule here is that if you have a hard edge split, a smoothing split, you got to have a UV split, and then you got to have padding in your UV shell, and then have that dilation width set above 1 in Painter. Then you can also use, like we were talking about, that match by mesh name to stop that ray trace from intersecting pieces of geometry. So that's where you can use either multiple high definition meshes like we've done here, and then set the match to mesh by name, or you can have all of those high res meshes in one single FBX mesh, if it works that way for you. But like I said, sometimes people have been requesting, hey, can I use multiple? And yes, you can do that. It's just a matter of adding them here. The big trick, though, is you got to make sure that, as you saw here in my example, you got to make sure that low res and high res has the same mesh part names, or it's not going to work correctly. So like I said, I had a discrepancy between my low and my high, so it didn't bake out right. Meaning that it couldn't find the parts for to do the match by mesh name with. So like I said, you can add these multiple parts into here. So that's actually going to cover, let's see, we're right just at an hour here, and so that's going to cover what it is I want to cover with the baking. Now there's a question here. Let's check this out. Let's see, does the dilation stop before intersecting with other UV shells automatically? In that, I'm trying to think. I'm not 100% sure exactly how that works. I don't think it does automatically. But when you have the match by mesh name enabled, it's like a masking. It's like that's where the masking is happening. So like that dilation is only affecting those specific shells. So it doesn't give you any problem. Like you don't have to like worry about, oh, this has this, like you have two settings here basically. Like if you have your dilation, which is basically just like a bleed. So right at your UV shell, like I said, we're going to bleed it out by so many pixels that you want to have it bled out. Now, this diffusion, what that does, here, let's do this. Let me jump over into my 2D view. Okay, so let's just imagine here, okay, this is the normal, okay? And like I said, hopefully, let me see if I can turn on. It might be able to show it. Let's do... All right, I don't think it's going to visualize it correctly. So right here, this is right at an edge, but we actually baked it with some bleed already. Yeah, so it's not showing it. It's just not showing that bleed here in the 2D view. So like I said, the first setting here, this dilation width, what it does is it just bleeds out by whatever pixel value you set in here. So like, is it going to go right outside the UV and then just bleed it out like maybe 20 pixels? What the diffusion then does is it just takes that value and just stretches it all the way to the edges. Here, let me cancel that here. It just stretches it all the way to the edges. So, but it doesn't intersect in here. They just stretch out until they hit each other, basically. So in a way, the dilation part is, yes, that is automatic or whatever. But the dilation width, I don't think is automatic, but it gets masked because of the way if you have match by mesh name on. Like if you didn't have that on, then they could bleed into each other. So hopefully that answers the question. I'm sorry, it's kind of a long, kind of winded answer there, but it's kind of confusing where you have the two settings. The reason why we have this diffusion setting as well, and we've had a lot of people ask questions about that. They'll look at the export and you'll see it just like bleeds all the way out, and they're like, oh, that looks so bizarre. Like, what is that for? The reason is because when you have your texture and it's being used in game, and that texture gets mipped down to a lower so like the lower it gets mipped, the more apparent seams can appear, like those kind of black dark edges can appear as the texture gets smaller. The that bleed gap, as it gets texture filtered at a lower resolution, the fidelity between that, it's so finite that's why it ends up showing a seam. So what you do is you want to make sure that you just bleed that all the way to the edges of something. And so what you want to do with that is have that enabled if you know that your texture is going to be mipped and you don't have a specific control over that mipping. So I always leave it on. So like if, when the texture gets mipped down, you won't end up getting that seam as the texture gets lowered. So, okay, hopefully that's okay. But yeah, you're right. The diffusion is for the infinite stretching is what this is. So infinite stretching, and then this is a very specific pixel value. Okay, so thanks again, everybody, for joining us on this webinar. I'm sorry I had that issue with the scene. I was just trying to do something different with different software and just trying to show different solutions. I want to start introducing some more Macs or different things like that. Not that the programs matter at all, but it's just different techniques and just different ways, but also to kind of illustrate how everything comes together. But yeah, I'm sorry we had some of those crashes and stuff like that, and we had to drop back to a different model. But anyways, that we did end up covering all the stuff that we wanted to cover, and like I said, 2.6 is out. Definitely should be out by now. So please be sure to check that out. Like I said, the newer stuff that came in Painter was more kind of pipeline oriented, which is actually pretty good. And it probably can help you guys as well, because we do get a lot of questions where people, oh, you know what, I did this texture, I was in my 3D program, I changed the material, I tried to bring it back into Painter, everything's broken. And so now like I said, we can use our reassign texture set window here to fix those issues and stuff like that. So hopefully, if you guys have students that have that kind of issue happening a lot, you now have a way to help them solve those problems. I know that we were getting tons of support requests for that. So hopefully now we'll have a good solution for that. So thanks, everybody. Let us know if you have any questions. Always, please feel free to email me directly. I'd be happy to help you. Charles is going to send a recap email. We'll have this guy recorded, and he'll give you the link to all that. Always, I ask if you guys have any specific type of things you want to show. We've kind of been doing Painter quite a few times now. Honestly, I think I'd like to try to get back more to some things with Designer, because there's so much more things we can show with Designer. I'd like to kind of get back into doing more like, okay, here's how we create this type of material, that kind of stuff, instead of more like how to use the program kind of things. So get more into kind of more creation type aspects and stuff. So please let me know if that's okay with you guys. Just email me, email Charles if you guys have any suggestions of things you want to see. Thanks a lot, everybody. Charles will do the recap, and I will see you next time. Take care.